All right, good morning again, everyone. Welcome to Mount Carmel Bible Church. Thank you for being here. It's a rainy morning. And, I know you've been at the revival all weekend and maybe a little tired of being here, but we appreciate you here. And thank you for listening wherever you're listening. We hope you get an opportunity to come and join us and view us live some Sunday morning. We'd love to have you. All right, now, figured I'd start this one off. The last few times we were here, kind of a more gloom and doom kind of sermons and not as uplifting as you'd like, so I figured I'd start us out with a nice colorful picture to throw you off and think we're going to have a better one. But we'll kind of back into it. Why does the world choose evil? Now, we can look at the world right now, we can see the news, and we can see that things are going bad, right? Not just the natural disasters, the dam breaking, the fires, the tornadoes, the bad weather, but the climate we live in. The different people out there that are screaming hatred towards each other. There's obvious choices that we're going to have to make come election year, come election time, where there's candidates that are kind of following the Bible, and the ones that are completely not following the Bible. And it's up to us Christians to make the better choices. We need to look into the candidates. We need to look into what the issues are. We need to read the proposed laws that we're going to be voting on, because I got to break this to you, and I'm sure this is going to shock you, but we're not going to hear the truth from the news. We're not going to hear the truth from the politicians. I know that's a shocker, right? You need to take a minute to absorb that. We're all on the same page, right? People will say anything to get you to vote for them. People will say anything to get you to buy their products. You know, it used to be as simple as, Coke or Pepsi. We drink Coke because it's better. Drink Pepsi because it's better. We like Coke. We like Pepsi. It's not. Now it wouldn't surprise me if they would have an ad campaign saying that one will kill you and one will not, right? The media and advertising are just flat out in your face lying. And people in the population are absorbing those lies. They're listening to it. And it sounds like it's a horrible thing, and it sounds like the world is falling apart, but this is not new. This isn't new. Back when Jesus was alive, there were rumors, there were liars, and there were people that were trying to convince you to follow God. There were people that were trying to convince you not to follow God. They knew, the Pharisees and Sadducees, they all knew Jesus was the Son of God. And they chose not to follow him. And they chose to fight him. People who don't follow God don't want others to follow God either. That's a big difference, right? Most Christians, we care about each other. We want other people to follow, but we're not going to force you to follow, because that's not what Jesus wants. We can't force somebody to be Christian. We know that. But the other side thinks they can force us not to be Christian. They want to force us not to be Christian. It's clear as day. There are people out there that scream and yell at people who don't believe what they believe. We know, as Christians, that is not going to help anybody. When somebody's yelling at you, do you listen to them? Do you listen to their point of view? Do you hear their argument? No, we don't. We put up our defenses and we start yelling back. And that's not the right thing to do either, because we're just going to escalate the situation. But when we remove God from the schools, We started the downslide. Now we've removed God from a bunch of the songs that are out there. We can't have Christmas songs anymore on the radio because they're offensive to others. So we've got to take offensiveness away. TV, same way. They're censoring the word God bless you on some stations. They're censoring that. They're beeping it out or cutting off the volume. It's happening. And we think this is new. They're trying to get God out of the public eye, and they're going to replace it with something worse. Let's look at the choice that was made to release Barabbas over Jesus. This is in many of the scriptures, and we're going to go through a couple of them, starting with Matthew 27:15 through 23. The crowd chose Barabbas. Now, to give you some background, Pontius Pilate was in charge of the region at the time, and he made a tradition of releasing a prisoner at this particular festival. When the Pharisees brought Jesus before him and said, "We want this man crucified," it's because the Greek governors, they were over control over this region, and no one could be executed without their permission. So they had to convince Pilate to execute Christ. Now Pilate rose to the level that he was in because he was probably connected in some way. He was educated, he was smart, he was fair, and he didn't want to cause problems in his region because then he'd have to answer to his bosses. Right? So he was presented with the Pharisees wanting to kill Christ, wanting to execute him for a crime that he didn't believe he committed. He didn't understand why they were angry. And he didn't want to have anything to do with this. But he had to keep the peace. So let's look at the scripture. Matthew 27:15 through 23. Now at the feast, the governor was accustomed to releasing for the crowd any one prisoner whom they wanted. And they had then a notorious prisoner named Barabbas. So when they had gathered, Pilate said to them, "Whom do you want me to release to you, Barabbas or Jesus, who is called Christ?" Now, I'm going to stop there for a moment. Barabbas was in prison for insurrection, not necessarily against Rome, but most likely against the church, the leadership. He committed murders. He was a bad dude. No question. He was in prison for a reason. And Pilate gave them an option. I can release this horrible guy that you hate, or I can release Jesus, who really didn't do anything but talk. Let's continue reading. For he knew that it was out of envy that they had delivered him up. Out of envy. Besides, while he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent word to him, "Have nothing to do with that righteous man, for I have suffered much because of him today in a dream." Now the chief priests and elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas and destroy Jesus. The governor said to them, "Which of these two do you want me to release for you?" And they said, "Barabbas." Pilate said to them, "Then what shall I do with Jesus, who is called Christ?" And they said, "Let him be crucified." And he said, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Let him be crucified." See, even Pilate knew that it was envy that brought Jesus before him. The priests and elders could not communicate to the people the way Jesus did. Jesus talked to the common people, the sinners, the ones that were out in the fields, the laborers. He went to the people who needed him and brought them up. Whereas the elders, they didn't care about the common people as long as the common people were bringing in money and donations to the church. It was out of envy. They saw their power being taken by Jesus. So they had to persuade the crowd. Now again, it's hard to imagine Jesus just less than a week ago, he was parading himself into Jerusalem. Crowds screaming and hollering and loving the fact that he was there. He rode in as a donkey and they were throwing palm leaves at his feet. He rode in as a king. And now he's a prisoner. Normally, these exchanges between Pilate and the crowd would happen midday or in the evening. But this one happened early in the morning. It happened when the Pharisees and Sadducees wanted it done up immediately. So the crowd that was there was pretty much their crowd. The early voters, if you will. They came out and they stirred up their crowd. They persuaded their crowd to choose the wrong person. Think of it as the media today. Persuading the people, the populace, to the wrong person. Or the person they want, rather than the person that may be best for you. The people knew Jesus. But those people probably weren't there at this time. Let's move on. Pilate delivers Jesus to be crucified. Matthew 27, 24 through 26. So when Pilate saw that he was gaining nothing, but rather the riot was beginning, he took water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, "I am innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourselves." And all the people answered, "His blood is on us and our children." Then he released Barabbas, and having scorned Jesus, delivered him to be crucified. This is an important message because it's repeated in other Gospels. In Luke 23, 18 through 25, Pilate delivers Jesus to be crucified. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but the highlighted, they were urged, demanding, with the loud cries, that he should be crucified. The crowd was yelling for him to be crucified. They were urged on by the elders. They were convinced to do this. And I'm sure the crowd didn't do any fact checking. I'm sure they didn't look into why he was there. They didn't care to hear about it. They were riled up. In Mark 15, 6 through 15, again, the same story. In 3 Gospels, Pilate gave the people the opportunity to free Jesus or to free the murderer. And Pilate said to them, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Crucify him." There's noise in this world. There's noise everywhere that distracts us. Each person in that crowd that shouted out, "Crucify him," whether their intention was to follow God and they thought this man was bad, or whether intention was, we just want to see this guy die, whatever their intention was, they're going to have to answer to God for their actions. Let that sink in. No matter what our intentions are, we are going to have to answer to God for what we do, for what we say, for what we convince others of. Whether you believe the media or you don't believe the media, whether you follow one party or another party. Personally, I don't follow either party. You got to do your own research. You got to look into things yourself. Because if you don't, you could be voting for Barabbas rather than Christ. They turned from the truth. They chose evil. The elders knew the scriptures. These weren't common folk. These weren't farmers, fishermen, carpenters. These were priests. These were temple workers. They knew the scriptures. They knew what the scriptures said. They knew what to look for. They may have not known all of the scriptures and all of the signs pointing to Christ, but they had to know a few of them. They had to know some of them. They knew what they were doing was wrong. They knew, because they even said after Jesus was crucified, they sent guards to the burial site. They knew what they were doing. And they chose evil anyway. They knew Jesus was speaking the truth. And they chose worldliness. They chose the power that they had, the positions that they had. They wanted that more than they wanted the truth. And when we know the scriptures, we know the truth. We know what to look for. Will we follow God? Will we follow the Bible? Will we follow His guidance? When He tells us this is wrong, are we going to do it? Or are we going to turn away from it? We will be judged for that. Now, what happened to Barabbas? A lot of speculation, a lot of theories, a lot of ideas. We don't really know. There's nothing really written about Barabbas after what we just read, other than he was free. Some people want to believe, as I do, that he followed Christ, that he realized what had happened, and that Jesus was sacrificed for everyone, but in particular for Barabbas. Barabbas was let go and given another chance because Christ took his place. We are all like Barabbas in that way, because we all sin. We have all given ourselves to sin in one way or another throughout our life, but Jesus took our place. Barabbas was going to be executed for his crimes, and we should have been executed for our crimes. But Christ came in and took over and took Barabbas' place. And he took your place, He took your place. He took my place. And that's the part that we should be clinging to. Jesus died for us. We need to live for him. It's that simple. Jesus died for Barabbas. I hope he saw that. I hope he recognized that. And I hope he followed the disciples. There's no evidence that he did. But wouldn't that make a great story? Jesus died specifically for him. In a very real and actual way. And in a very real and actual way, he died for me and for you. He loves us that much. He wants us to follow him that much. And don't we owe that to him? We come to church. We learn about him. We sing songs to him. Sometimes the songs aren't songs that we like. Sometimes the melody is a little off. That's just me. But we are supposed to enjoy the life that he's given us and love him for it. And if we love him and appreciate what he's done for us, we should show that by engaging in him, by showing him that we appreciate his sacrifice, by showing him that we believe in him and we want to follow him and we want to do what he wants us to do, because that is showing appreciation. I want us to think about that this week. I want us to think about how many times we have failed in our lives. That's not very uplifting, is it? How many times have we messed up? How many times, just the little stuff to the big stuff. Turning right instead of turning left. Cutting somebody off accidentally in traffic. Notice I said accidentally. Yeah, I know who you are. Some people pull in front of me all the time. I'm just going to consider it an accident. How many times have you said the wrong thing? How many times have you taken a hammer to your thumb when you were supposed to be hammering that nail and said a bad word? How many times have we failed God and realized he loves us anyway? He did that for us. He sacrificed himself for us because he loves us that much. And all we need to do is ask God, I'm sorry, God, I messed up again. Mean it and try to do better. Notice I said try to do better. Try to do better. That's all it takes, trying to do better. Because we're never going to be perfect. We're never going to be flawless. We're never going to be the perfect Christian. We're never going to be that. But if we just use that as an excuse, well, I'm never going to be perfect, so why try? How is that going to work out for us? If Larry said to Lori, I'm never going to be a perfect husband, so I'm not even going to try, I'm sure he'd come in with a black eye or two. You try. You're never going to be perfect, but you try. And she tries. And it works. You too. I'm sure there might be something that you're not really too happy about each other with, but you try and you see that he tries and it works.
63 years.
63 years. That's a lot of trying.
But it works.
And I'm sure it's perfect. I wasn't trying to get anybody in trouble. I'm sure it's perfect because you were both trying and you're both working at it. That's the key. And if it works in a relationship, when you're both trying and you're both forgiving and you're both loving, it's going to work, right? Why doesn't it work with God? It does. He loves us. He wants us to be happy. He wants us to be successful. But he knows that you're only going to be happy with him, right? He's trying. So what do we got to do? Try. That's it. That's it. Try. Try a little bit harder. Try a little bit more. And watch what happens. Let's go to Lord in prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for this time we get to spend together learning about you. Thank you for taking the place of Barabbas. Thank you for taking the place of me. There's no way I could ever repay you for that. I have not the ability, not even close. But I thank you. Lord, give me the strength, wisdom, and character to continue to try to get closer to you, to be closer to you. Lord, I love you, and I thank you for every single thing you've given me. Every bone in my body, every ache in my soul. Thank you for every trial that you put in front of me. Thank you for everything you've done. Help me to be closer to you, Lord, so that one day I can live in heaven with you. And in Jesus' name.